Welcome to the Merritt City Council board meeting, council meeting, whoops, held November 24th, 2020. There is one late item on the agenda. I need a unanimous approval to send it through. It is about open meetings under Order M192 for 2020. I need a mover, a seconder. That council resolves that the public cannot be safely accommodated at Merritt City Hall meetings within the public health orders issued by Dr. Bonnie Henry, and that openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability will be met by videoing and webcasting all meetings on www.merritt.ca, briefing media before meetings, and publishing agendas and minutes from November 25th, 2020 to January the 13th, 2021 on www.merritt.ca. So, all in favor? Opposed? None. That was carried unanimously. Sorry. What year is wrong? Say that again? I think I said November 25th, 2020 to January 13th, 2021. Okay. I'm not seeing a late item up there anyways, but okay, I see what you're reading. Yeah. Greg, can you fix that on 8.4? The resolution at the very bottom says 2020, not 21. Yes, Your Worship, I'll fix that. Thank you. So public input, there is no public input. So the adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting held on November 27th, 2020 be adopted. I need a mover. So moved. Seconder? Second. And any errors or omissions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There are no delegations. Wow. And unfinished business 6.1, we've got the BC Provincial Nomination Program recommendation that came from the Committee of the Whole, that the committee recommend to council that Community Futures Nicola Valley be named the lead contact for BC PNP program effective immediately. Mover? Seconder? Second. Okay, and discussion. Well, I would like to ask staff if the term effective immediately is doable. From my understanding, we can't tell the ministry to do anything immediately. Mr. George.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if this passes tonight, staff would request the change to the province. As mentioned at the Committee of the Whole meeting, they're letting all the communities know by the end of the year if the program will be continuing. So we'll respond back to all of council if they are going to be extending that when we hear. But, yeah.
So that last part kind of got garbled. You said it so fast, I didn't catch it.
So we can, if this passes this evening, then we will apply for the province that the lead organization be changed from the City of Merritt to Community Futures.
To the province. That's
Correct.
What we're recommending. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 7.1. Zoning Amendment Bylaw, Mr. MacArthur.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is in regards to the Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2293, which is a proposed amendment to repeal section 4.41.3 of the zoning bylaw, which sets out the number of retail cannabis sales stores in the city, which is currently set at 4. If approved, there would then be no cap on the number of stores. The impetus for this was that a number of businesses have come forth requesting to apply to open a retail cannabis sales store, but we had 4 applications already that had been approved by council, and so no other applications could be accepted. So far, 2 of those stores have been approved by the province and opened, and a third application is still being processed by the province. A 4th application was terminated at the provincial process stage, and so there is now 1 available position or slot open for a sales store. So if council were to approve the proposed amendment bylaw, we would then be able to accept applications for any stores that want to apply, and then council, of course, would review those and decide whether to support those applications going forth to the province. The alternative, of course, is to not do that, in which case staff would then have to create a process on how to determine to allocate or to accept applications for that 4th available spot. There was a public hearing held earlier this evening, and we didn't have anyone speak for or against the proposed amendment bylaw. So I think I'll leave it there, and if council have any questions, staff are here to answer those.
Thank you. And it's also noted that there were no written document that came to council either.
That's correct. No written submissions either.
Okay. And does anyone have any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll enter debate. Does council have debate? Well, I need a motion. Sorry. I need a mover that council give 3rd reading to zoning amendment bylaw 2293-2020. Okay, and now I can ask for debate. Technicalities. Okay, I'm asking a question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And that council adopt zoning amendment bylaw 2293, 2020. And mover? Seconder? Okay, and debate is open. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. On to 8.1, COVID Economic Recovery Initiatives. And this is going to be introduced by one of 2 staff members, but I think Mr. George is taking the lead on this.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. And you'll find the staff report on page 15. So this is a staff report coming forward on the COVID-19 economic recovery initiatives that were originally brought forward on May 26th at the regular council meeting. There. So the package and the brochure that was created can be found on page 19. I will provide a brief summary here of the initiatives, what's been done to date, and then the staff report is if council would like to move forward with extending these initiatives past the deadline of the end of the year, or if council would like to have these conclude at the end of December 2020. So the first initiative is the Buy Local campaign. As council may remember, $5,000 was allocated to the Merritt District Chamber of Commerce to access for a Shop Local campaign. City staff are currently working with the chamber to provide the remaining of the funds. Only $387 has been spent to date, but there is work occurring right now for a Shop Local holiday campaign to utilize the outstanding marketing dollars here. A downtown pedestrian zone. So council may recall that there was 2 separate downtown markets on Quilchena Street, the first one being a 2-day market on October 12th and October 13th, the second being a 1-day market on October 10th. And these were opportunities for the city as well as our nonprofits and our farmers market to reach out to the community, and we heard some great results from the businesses that were there. The third initiative is the city beautification projects, and on September 15th, the regular meeting there, council provided $5,000 to the Economic Recovery City Beautification Mural Project to the Nicola Valley Arts Council. And city staff are currently working with the Arts Council for new murals and beautification projects in early 2021. The fourth project here is patio development, and the city has received 5 inquiries for patio construction since the fees were waived, and there has been 4 businesses that applied. The staff report here says 2, but talking with my colleague, there has been 4 total. And just a little bit of information here. On October 27th, the patio fee itself was reduced from $750 down to $300, and this is in place moving forward. The next initiative is sign permits. So in 2020, just so council can see the comparison between 2020 to 2019, we had 7 businesses take advantage of the sign permits compared to 15 applications in 2019. I will note, though, that as the Economic Development and the Planning Department were compiling all of these numbers, that this only accounts for those businesses that applied for a sign permit. The fees were waived during this, but there are other businesses that have not completed the sign application forms that we request and need, and signs appeared in the community. So these are just the numbers that we have the information from. And the last initiative is the outdoor display of goods. There was only 1 inquiry for this initiative, and unfortunately there wasn't any businesses that took advantage of this, looking at extending the use of their outdoor space and parking spaces there. Staff is recommending that council moves to extend the COVID-19 economic recovery initiatives to October 31st, 2021. The rationale behind this, looking at what the provincial government is doing, they have extended the provincial temporary patio and alcohol delivery rules from October 31st, 2020 until October 31st, 2021. So this would be in line with what the province is doing on this front. Don, was there anything else that you'd like to add for this?
Thank you, Will, and thank you, Your Worship. I think that's a pretty good overview there. I just wanted to point out that there also were several businesses that have put chairs out on the sidewalk in front of the restaurants, which wasn't applied for as under the outdoor goods display of outdoor goods provisions, but that would fall under that same category, but they didn't apply, so we couldn't stat it.
So is there a mix-up in communication then for business? And do we want to clarify that, seeing as how we have media presence?
Yeah, I think it's important that although these fees are waived, we still do require an application. So sign permits are free, but we need an application for them to ensure that signs are being installed for safety purposes, for example, and also so that we can keep stats on what's being done in the community. And that goes double for outdoor display of goods, because we want to make sure that there's proper pedestrian access, wheelchair access, stroller access on our sidewalks. So if people are applying, we need to be able to inform them of how much of the sidewalk needs to be left clear. So yeah, so I think there's some work to do with businesses and getting that message across.
So are we asking the businesses that have already done this without a permit to just come and apply for a permit?
That would be great if they want to do that retroactively, but certainly going forward, any other businesses that want to install signs, put outdoor display of goods, install a patio, et cetera, if they can give us a call, that'd be great.
Thank you.
I think, if I may add, Your Worship, just looking at the communication for these programs, as I mentioned before, a brochure of the initiatives, it was created, and I'd like to thank our councillors as well as community members that went out to our businesses. Of course, we shared this information via our local radio and newspaper, on the city website, social media, but physically there was these brochures, I believe around 200 were printed out and provided to the community, and we had council members and community members go to the places of business to provide this information.
Thank you. So we need a mover and a seconder that council extend the City of Merritt COVID-19 economic recovery initiatives to October 31st, 2021. Okay, and first, questions for staff. Councillor Christopherson. Oh, sorry.
It's a little behind the fact now, but I was wondering why the two options there, extending it to October 31st, and then the other option was to extend it to December 31st. And besides the obvious 3 months, I'm wondering, is there an economic reason why we wouldn't extend it further than the October 31st deadline? Is everything frozen in town and nobody's outside anyways?
I can speak on that. Through to Your Worship, to Councillor Christopherson. The rationales behind choosing October 31st was to fit in line with the provincial standards that they've put in for that. The December 31st is just to have a 1-year extension for the program, but it's completely up to council if you would like to have a discussion around extending it further than that. Those were just the two rationales for those dates.
And basically why I'm asking is, although we're not doing Country Christmas this year, hopefully it'll be back in business next year, and so I'm wondering whether those initiatives would be advantageous for the city to keep in effect until Country Christmas activities are over with, which would make it December 31st. So.
Are you making a motion or an amendment to the motion?
Yeah, we already moved the first one. I would like to amend it to December 31st date.
Is there a seconder? I'll second. Any questions on the amendment? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Oh, are you? He's a question for staff. No, Mike's a question for staff. This is.
Yes.
We're going to do the amendment first.
Okay.
Talk to the amendment. Debate the amendment
talk
first?
to the amendment,
Just
yes.
so I'm not, yeah. I like the idea of moving to December 31st, give as much time as one, but I'm kind of torn because I kind of like leaving it in the realm of the timeline with the provincial government as well. I'm trying to want to inject some optimism into here to think this will all be over by then, but on the other hand, who knows, right? So I think I'm okay with leaving it till October the 1st. We can have a serious look at it in July. And if it needs be, then, it depends on where we are. If we're in the third wave or whatever it is, we can always extend it to then. But I can go either way on it and kind of thing. But I was just maybe keeping in line with the provincial government makes a little more sense there.
Anybody else speaking to the amendment? Okay, call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we're now looking at December 31st, 2021 as the date. And questions for staff? Councillor Bangu.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. George, I'm wondering how is city beautification and COVID-19 economic recovery related? Thank you.
Mr. George, sorry.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Bangu, So the city beautification project was part of these initiatives. It was brought forward at the September 15th. The funding that was allocated from the city to the Nicola Valley Arts Council is towards downtown murals, towards city beautification, and these are some projects looking at the COVID economic recovery to increase traffic to our downtown core, to increase traffic from those that are coming through Merritt to stop in our downtown core and visit those businesses. So the beautification of our community was identified through the community consultations we had in the lead up to this when we had the roundtable discussions in Committee of the Whole.
And I think to clarify, it wasn't just downtown murals. The Arts Council had a number of different projects. Murals was just one possibility.
I didn't mention murals. I don't think anybody mentioned the word murals.
I did.
Why? I didn't mention it. I mean, should we just mention random things that random, right?
Anybody else? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. On to 8.2, 2021 meeting schedule. Mr. Lois.
Thank you, Your Worship. Every year you are required to adopt an annual meeting schedule and to advertise it accordingly. The procedure bylaw sets out how your meetings will normally be scheduled. Over the last about 15 months, you've made a couple of requests or acceded to a couple of staff requests to vary that. So those variances are carried through to this year as well, such as only a single meeting in the summer months and in December. And there's also one further change which was required to avoid collision with a conference in the optimistic hope that UBCM, SELGO and FCM may take place again next year. I have had one councillor request to republish this calendar with starting the week on a Sunday, not a Monday, so I will do that. But other than that, that is the calendar proposed by staff for meetings next year.
And just to mention that that councillor happened to be one of the elder ones and he's having difficulty keeping up. Sunday is definitely Sunday. Sorry. Couldn't help it, Kurt. Councillor Luck.
Subject to criticism, better places than
Some levity, that's nice. One of the things we've been talking about is changing times as well. Has that come up in the conversations at all, Mr. Lewis? Or are we going to say at the same times? I know they've been talked about. Just throwing it out there as a question.
So the proposal at this point, because you're required to adopt the calendar in advance, so
Yep.
at the moment I stuck with 7 o'clock, which is in the procedure bylaw, but I'm hoping to bring the proposed revised procedure bylaw to the December 15th meeting, which would, one of the proposals in there would move the start time to 6 p.m. for standard meetings, in which case that would apply to this calendar. But at the moment, the proposal is 7 o'clock.
Okay, got ahead of myself. Good, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Any other, okay, we need a mover. That council approve the proposed Schedule A of regular meetings for 2021. And debate is open. Nobody has anything to say. All in favor? Oh, hold on, can we, sorry, I jumped the gun. Councillor Fair.
Well, my comment is just that the schedule we switched to in this past year resulted, I think, in longer meetings held during the months that we didn't have as many meetings. So I don't really have an amendment to make on that as such, but I just thought I'd bring it up in case anyone else has similar concerns.
Well, there definitely was a heavy workload. And I think our purpose was to ensure that staff got vacation time. Can we ask staff, did it give you, during this new COVID time, Mr. Lois?
If I can speak on behalf of my colleagues, I think I can say very few of us have had a restful summer. I think the proposal last year to reduce to a single meetings in the summer month to allow for vacation time has a lot of merit. Obviously, it did not work well this year with particularly unusual situations. I think we had some fairly major projects, such including the new zoning bylaw, the proposal to start the official community plan, and that coincided with all the extra workload and complications of COVID. I think as staff, we would probably like to try it again if you would let us, but that is, of course, entirely up to council.
Thank you. Councillor Fair.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. It certainly satisfies my curiosity. It's good to know that you guys still think it'll work for you. So, thank you.
Councillor Etchart.
I think keeping optimistic here, if we have a vaccine in place and people actually get restful vacations, that it would be easier to plan the meetings around the one agenda per month. But I think we'll also have to consider that some of these meetings could be quite long, as they were in the summer months. But they were good meetings. They were just a lot of prep for the staff, getting everything into the agenda and all the delegations organized. But I think it worked well. For us, it seemed to work well, but they were long. I don't know how much stress it caused the staff, but I didn't mind having the one longer meeting. Thanks.
Councillor Christopherson.
As the aged member here. If we get lonely, we can always have lots of COW meetings in between, just so that we don't lose touch with each other.
Anybody else want to speak to this? I was going to say that the length of the meeting sometimes was the debate section, just wanting to bring that to our attention. We did do a lot of debate and lengthy debates at that. I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now, this is 8.3, a proposal for visitor information services. Mr. George, staff report.
Thank you, Worship. I feel I'm talking a lot this evening. So this staff report can be found on page 26 of the council agenda, and this is a proposal for the visitor information services at the Merritt Visitor Information Center at the Baillie House for 2021. The contract that the City of Merritt has with the Nicola Valley Heritage Society to operate the physical bricks and mortar location of the visitor center concludes at the end of this year, at the end of 2020. So this proposal is to extend, to enter into another contract with the Nicola Valley Heritage Society for 2021. And there is some information in the staff report. Of course, as you've seen for the quarterly visitor services reports that have come forward to council, there has been a dramatic decrease due to COVID-19, of course, with the visitor center. But we are seeing quarter after quarter in 2020, the numbers are increasing, which is good. Of course, there is the travel ban still on, and the city staff has been able to keep in constant contact with not only Destination BC, but also our other visitor centers around the province to make sure that we're following best practices and the safety of those that are our staff as well as visitors that are coming through there. So the staff report is recommending that the City of Merritt enter into another one-year agreement at the same amount that we currently have for 2021. There are options on the table as well to enter into a 2 or 3 year agreement, but I think I'll leave it at that, and if there's any questions, I can answer them.
Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll leave the options. Oh, you have a question? Councillor Bangu?
Thank you, Mayor. Are other organizations asked to bid on this contract, or do we just give it to the Nicola Valley Heritage Society year after year? Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Bangu, the Merritt Visitor Centre at the Baillie House has been in operation, I believe, for about 15 years, and since that time, they've received the bid from the city, the Nicola Valley Heritage Society, to operate the physical visitor centre here. So it's just been, would you like to enter into the contract? There hasn't been a offer for other bids.
And I think the visitor centre only was a part of that since the Destination BC closed exit 286. Can you complete that piece?
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
of course. Through to your worship. So when the Provincial Visitor Centre closed, we were able to apply to move the Merritt Visitor Information Booth status from a booth to a center. So that allowed us to apply for additional funding, allow us to use the official Destination BC Eye. We were able to receive some additional funding from Destination BC each year. They had continued to operate in the past along with the Provincial Visitor Centre, but that was a change when the Provincial Visitor Centre closed. And you will note as well, I mentioned it here, the Mobile Visitor Information Centre that was created in 2018. There was a conference call today actually with Destination BC, and about 80 visitor centers staff were on the call here around the mobile visitor services, and I'm pleased to announce that we are definitely leading the charge in that. About a third of our visitors looking at 2019 data came from our mobile visitor services compared to our bricks and mortar, and we have lots of communities way larger than us that are looking at our mobile visitor services as a great example to increase that traffic. So it's beneficial to have the physical bricks and mortar, the online, and the mobile that we currently have for offering visitor services.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder. Council could direct staff to execute the agreement for the staff recommendation of a one-year term. Thank you. I need a seconder. Did you second that? Yes. Okay, thank you. And I think Councillor Bangu, you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, actually, I'd like to amend the motion. I'd like to see other organizations compete for this contract and allow the best proposal to receive the contract. I'm not sure. I guess perhaps initially we worked with one because it was the best option, but it's always good to see what others can bring to the table before we decide on who we should go with.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Do you want to speak to the amendment? Anybody want to speak to that amendment? Councillor Luck.
In the report, if you look in the staff report here, staff are also seeking council direction on the overall desire for a new Merritt Visitor Center and visitor service in Nicola Valley. If council deems a new visitor center as recently created in Kelowna and Revelstoke a priority project, staff can research options for locations, budgets, grants, operating structure to bring the staff report back to council. And that's why I will support this amendment, and that I think it is time that we can evaluate contracts like this. I don't think it is good for the city or the citizens to see an ongoing contract year after year after year after year. To get value and to know that people are being held accountable, I think it's very, very important. I would just like to, Councillor Bangu's, is to make sure that we include in there an RFP process as well in that motion, that we could go to a proper RFP that'll be submitted out. And I'd like to make sure we would timeline that on, because 2 years ago when this motion was brought to the table to extend it for 3 years, I suggested 1 year, we compromised on 2 years, and this should have been done in the last 2 years. It wasn't done, so I think it's a very, very appropriate time to get this done, and that this needs to be tested in the marketplace to make sure citizens are getting value for money. I'm not saying they aren't, I'm just saying there's no way of testing it, and I think this would be a good way, so I fully support this amendment.
Anybody else want to speak to this amendment? Councillor Richard.
I can appreciate the comments for wanting others to get input for different things and different organizations to run the Baillie House, but we're also 5 weeks away from the end of the year and the end of the contract. And with no plan in place and nothing to really digest and dissect and look at, I think that the prudent thing to do would be to renew the contract and accept it. It's not that I don't agree with the comments that I'm hearing that other organizations could run something or have a different venue or anything else, but there really isn't a lot of time in a pandemic for other groups. I mean, we could even get shut down from having essentials purchased, so are we just going to shut it down January 1st? I mean, with all due respect, it seems like the only thing we should do is renew it and then look at options and only do it for 1 year. Thank you.
I'm not sure who's next. Councillor Christopherson.
I'm not quite sure where to begin with this one, because we haven't asked for input from any other groups before, and we've got a group that has been very successful at operating the center as it is. Not it operates more than just as a structure, because it receives a lot of use in the summer because of its location. It's not just a building, it's also a park and a picnic area and all that. There are deficiencies with it, and we all know that there's not the bathroom space that would be advantageous in a newer center. But I think we also need to realize that we've got I'd call it a precious jewel in our midst that has been dependent on a lot of community input. It's not just the money that goes into it. I would very much like I would like to have us renew the term for one thing, so that there's not causing distress, especially at this time of year, for what's going to happen next year. But I'd also like to have ongoing discussions of why and what might be planned before we start putting out information that we're going to stop using what has been very, very successful for many, many years and has a dedicated group of volunteers that provide incalculable service there. So I'm speaking in favor of renewing it for a minimum of 1 year. I'd like to see it more than that. But
I'm going to move to Councillor Fair.
Thank you. I'm in favor of renewing the agreement for a year, not because I don't think that it shouldn't be put out for RFP, but I think with this option of making a potential new visitor center a priority, that we can simultaneously over the next year do that research. So I think it would be too rushed and create problems if we try to rush it by not renewing that contract for a year.
Thank you. Councillor Bangu.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Echart, Councillor Echart made some excellent points. Fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, tourism decreases during our winter season. The COVID restrictions are decreasing travel, so this might be a good time to entertain other options. And that's all it really is. It's entertaining options. The Nickel Valley Heritage Society should not fear competition or accountability, nor should we. And we don't know if they've been successful or not, because no one else has done this job. And as Councillor Luck has suggested, this should have been done 2 years ago. To put it off another year just might not be fair. Now, it just isn't fair to give taxpayer money without an RFP. And that's really where I come from, is fairness. Thank you.
Councillor Luck.
Yeah, I think I had a motion amendment all ready to go here, which would have included that we do fund for the next year, because this is going to take some time to, I'm not putting it on the board because there's one already on the table, but
Well, that's the only one we're speaking to right now.
yeah, I know. I'm just saying that I would have done it a little differently, that yes, we are going to fund them for this year.
But we're only speaking to this amendment.
Right. So the way the amendment stands, I can't support it because I'm in support of funding the group for the next year while we put the RFP process in place. So that's why I can't support the motion as is. So no, we can't drop the ball on them this year at all. That doesn't make sense at all. But certainly fund them for this year, and then while they're funded this year, then we do all the research into this new visitor center and that, and see where we go from there. So the way it stands, I can't support the motion, Councillor Bangu, but at this point.
And Councillor Etchart.
The other point that I had forgotten to mention earlier is that from this budget in here, a lot of the dollars were increases for supplies. There's a lot of cleaning supplies and whatnot, as there was a higher use of tissue and cleaning supplies as the bathrooms are getting used more with no exit 286 washrooms that were open. Having looked at the budget before, I didn't think that the expenses were unreasonable. And the figure there, I think, is either the same or very close to what it was the prior year. So while I think an RFP is a fair thing to request, I don't think that these numbers are unreasonable, and I think that they've done a reasonably good job with what they've had available. And I know that there's a lot of volunteers that help at the Baillie Centers, so I think that we should renew and explore other options in the next year, and that we should look at that. But I think we just need to extend this for the year and then look at the options that we have with the tourism groups. Thank you.
Thanks. And I recall that Mr. George talked to about this already being a booth already, and we got the I because they were a booth, and we were pretty happy just to get that I, because I think we hadn't had the I at the time. Mr. George, can you respond to that?
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. And yes, while there was the Provincial Visitor Center, that was the main visitor center for our area. When the Provincial Visitor Center closed down, then our local Merritt Visitor Information booth, we were able to apply for it to become a center. So when there was only one in the community, that's when they transitioned over. And just on the note, Councillor Etchart, for the COVID extra supplies, that's not looking at this budget here, the 53,000 or 52,000. Destination BC was able to assist visitor centers across the province up to $1,000 for those supplies. So that was extra funding that is not included in this 52. And the 52 that you see is the same figure that the city provided to the Nicola Valley Heritage Society last year. So that number is just carrying over. Yeah. And if I can just comment, I think staff is hearing the discussion that's happening with council, and that's one of the reasons why we put this section in here, to see what the flavor is, and staff can bring forward to council, some options, some other examples in 2021 to have a look at, to see how these visitor centers that we're seeing pop up, in Kelowna and Riverstoke were funded, and if council would like to explore, whether an RFP, entering into a new contract for visitor services, and what that would look like. So staff is hearing the conversations that's happening.
Thank you. Councillor White.
I think since I've been in Merritt, and prior to the Baillie House getting its current status, it's always been an attraction. I think it needs to continue being an attraction, but I also think for the way Merritt's growing, for what we're attracting to Merritt for visitors, for tourists, and promoting our outdoor adventures and everything that's going on here, we do need to have a different visitor center. I think what's going on out there within the province and all the funding available and all the things that will be happening, the Baillie House will definitely, I'm sure, qualify for funding along the way without having the visitor status and going back to what they were prior to getting that eye. And I think it's a very important attraction to the community and to Merritt and to visitors that come here for it, because there are visitors that do come for it, but it's just not sufficient for a proper proper visitor center. So that's my take on the whole situation. Thank you.
Okay, we're all kind of headed in the same direction, I think. What I'd like to say is the Baillie House stepped up when we didn't have any place for it. And I think staff appreciated that tremendously. The other thing is it hasn't been done over the last 2 years to look at because we never put it in our strategic plan. And we also have had other things such as zoning and OCP on our plate over the last couple of years. So this hasn't been a high priority for us, but it's certainly in everyone's mind. So I'm going to call the question on the amendment. Yeah. Council could direct staff to execute that other orgs get to compete with this contract. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So back to the original discussion. Council could direct. Pardon me? What did I say? Oh, it was defeated, yes. Thank you. And council could direct staff to execute the agreement for the staff recommendation and a 1-year term. And we have a mover and seconder for that, and the discussion is open. Councillor Luck.
Yes, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lewis, but I think the actual motion that staff recommend was that council direct the mayor and directors of corporate service to execute a 1-year tourism visit. Is that what the motion really should be? Rather than an option? That's the one that's on the page here.
Yes.
So I'm just clarifying because I want to move an amendment to it. I just want to make sure we got the right motion that I'm amending, right?
The motion currently before you is the council directs the mayor and director of corporate services to execute a 1-year tourism and visitor information services agreement with the Nipper Valley Heritage Society for $52,130.20 in 2021. And then that agreement, or this year's version of that agreement, is attached to the agenda.
Okay. So I'm going to I'll move that motion or second it, Mayor, because I think that's the real motion that should be on the table rather than one of the options, right? Because that gives a little more clarity to everybody. Do we have to take the other motion off the table? Because I want to amend it. That's why I want to make sure it's the right motion that we're moving, Mayor.
Well, they're the same other than the wording. That this gives us mayor and director of corporate services to execute a 1-year tourism and visitor information service agreement. It's the same thing with the Heritage Society for $52,000. It's wordier, it's more precise.
Yeah.
When we go back to the mover and the seconder.
Wait a second.
I don't know who they were. Do you? Okay, we're good.
I just want to make sure I'm amending the right motion.
Well, it's basically the same thing, except one is more detailed than the other.
Okay, then.
But what we've got is a motion on the table. So what are we going to do with that? Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I'm not sure how.
Your worship.
That's why I'm just asking.
Okay.
Through your worship to Councillor Luck, if you want to be absolutely clear about the text that you're amending, what you can do is propose an amendment and then include the full text of everything you want to say. which I believe would be that council directs the mayor and director of corporate services
Okay,
to execute a one-year tourism and visitor information services agreement with the Nicola Valley Heritage Society and to then run an RFP
okay.
or something to that effect.
Okay, so if I just make that amendment, including that, then it works?
If you move an amendment to delete the entire text and replace it with that, it all
Okay.
works.
Okay, so that's what I'll do.
Okay.
So I'm going to delete the previous text, and I'm going to include all that that's out from that council directs right to 2021, and that council directs staff to research a new Merritt Visitor Center and services, including locations, including but not limited to locations, budget, grants, and operating structures.
Could you slow it down a little bit, please?
I'm sorry.
But not limited to?
But not limited to locations, budgets, grants, and operating structures through and including a full RFP process.
Holy smokes.
So so what I'm saying here is that, yes, I agree with extending the funding for the next year, and it gives us that year to do what we should have been doing the last 2 years, even though it's not part of the strategic plan, but it was certainly what our thoughts were. Now I've got it in a motion. Now we got an emotion.
Hold it. We don't even have a seconder yet.
Oh, sorry.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay. Tony?
So now what I'm doing is just including some of the wording that the staff used now we've got it in a motion, now we're obligated to move forward and get everything done in the next year and have a look at what we need to do in an RFP process and make sure we got accountability and all those things that we've kind of talked about already. And I think this is good business practice as that needs to be done here in the city. And this kind of gives them their funding for a year. They're not going to have the carpet pulled out from under them or anything like that. Puts the funding in place, but now also we need to have a look at the process, which, like I say, we should have probably been looking at the last 2 years. But thank you.
And Councillor White? Okay. Councillor Christopherson, Councillor Fair.
Thank you. So I just feel I need to speak against the amendment because I believe staff has told us that they've heard what our intentions are for a new visitor center, and I would prefer to let them get back to us with that before we start amending this motion.
Councillor Etchart. Oh, sorry. I don't know who's on.
I think I was next.
Can I go to Councillor Christopherson first? Get back to you second.
Yeah, I would like to have staff do some homework for us first. And one of the questions that I would like answered for myself and probably a lot of other people is, I don't know how dependent the Heritage Society is for their survival on the tourism contract. And so before we start talking about limiting our contracts or canceling them, I would like to know what their options are if this contract is ever terminated, because they perform a really valuable service for the city of Merritt. It's highly respected throughout the province for visitors that come through. And so if it is deemed inadequate for our purposes of tourism, that's fair game. We need to know that. But I would like to know how it impacts the survival of the Heritage Society. I think they depend, I'm not sure, but I think they depend a lot on that contract to stay in existence. It was a huge, a lot of community input went into saving that building. And after they managed to save it, restore it, and have it for community use, I believe they were quite dependent on having a source of regular income coming in. And I'd like to know if that is still the case, or whether they would be able to perhaps operate as a museum or something along the line so that we don't lose what has been a very successful program there. And I'm grateful for all the work that they've done, and for anybody that goes into that building. It's a feel-good place. I don't want to lose it. So if we can have that as part of the clarification process, I'd very much appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Etchart.
I echo some of the comments that I've heard from Councillor Christopherson and Councillor Fair. I think that the staff can gather us some information that we need. I'm in support of renewing the contract for another year, and I also recognize that over time we probably could use a visitors facility that's a little bit bigger. Merritt's growing, and as we grow, we can do that and plan for it in the future. But I also am concerned that, you know, if things change and the Heritage Society does lose a contract, what would happen to the group, and also would we still have access to the Baillie House as it is, and would it be run the same way? Because having seen their budget before and knowing that they operate with a lot of volunteers, I don't know that it would really be run much cheaper with another organization. But I'm in support of renewing the contract. Thanks.
Which may mean you're against this amendment or you were for this amendment. I guess you can vote on that afterwards. Councillor Bengu. Councillor Luck, are you needing?
No, yeah, I'll speak.
Councillor
Go ahead,
Bengu.
Councillor Bengu first.
No, I think you're on first. Go ahead.
I'm asking Councillor Bengu,
No, go
you're
ahead.
on first.
You're okay.
All right. I think Merritt is in dire needs of an appropriate visitors information facility, and that would be amazing for Merritt. You know, as for the Baillie House's financial situation, is that the city's responsibility? And are they doing enough to raise money? I visited the Baillie House a few times over the summer, and I was surprised to discover that I was unable to purchase a drink. So are they exploring all their options to raise money? But again, Merritt is in dire needs of an appropriate visitors information center, and I will support this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Luck. Excuse me, Councillor Luck.
Yeah, I hear some of the chatter going around the table here, and this motion is simply going to, put staff on report that we want to report on all this stuff. They can come back if we accept this motion. It's not a fait accompli that this is what we're going to do. We might find that the Heritage Group is the best one that's running the thing or not. But this report's going to look at not only this, but an updated visitor center. It's going to look at it should look at the function of the Baillie House and what's going there. What would happen if they lose their funding? How we're not going to let Baillie House fall into ruin. That's for sure. There'll be some other type of funding on there. But to let this motion not pass the way it should be and have staff is making this recommendation in the report. We're telling staff, no, we don't trust them. I think we need to trust staff on this. They're the ones that made this recommendation. Why would we say no to their own recommendation? So all I'm doing is pulling together there, and then some of these concerns that we've made tonight, those can be into it, and as part of that, having that motion on the table, then the staff are on report to build the proper reports that they need and look at the proper statistics and everything so that we have it. If we don't, we'll go another year, and this might drop off the table again. We'll be here again next year approving another year's funding or 2 years or whatever. So I think for us not to approve a motion like this, and especially as it being part of staff, their recommendation to do this, we should probably be looking at approving this amendment and having staff pull a good bunch of information together for us, including some of the information you're talking about, Councillor Christophans, what will happen to the Heritage Committee and all those kind of things. Things are changing in Merritt, and we don't know how long they're going to be able to be sustainable as well as what they're doing. And I think we do need to be looking at a stronger visitor center at Merritt, because it's on the map now. People are recognizing Merritt as a place to come to and things like that, to tourism and all that. And we need to keep up with the times and improve our community. And I think this is just one of those ways of doing it, having proper processes. This is a council of processes. This is a broken process. I'm going to be quite honest with you. This is a broken process. There's no way we should year after year after year just write a check to some group. That's not appropriate. And then they might be the group that's doing it, but in time, you've got to finally test the waters and make sure everything is okay on that. This isn't saying they're not doing a good job. They've done some amazing things. But moving forward, we're trying to change the process, just like we've done with so many other things in the community here, and making huge improvements. So that's all I have to say at this point.
And if I can just clarify, your motion is not staff's motion. Your motion is to add an RFP to the process. And that's a complete different story than a staff report. Well, it's very picky. It's very different.
And I've added RFP in there for a purpose, absolutely. So we can see what the process would be to...
I guess I'm just clarifying that that is not staff's report. And we already have reports and stats on our economic and tourism areas. They do have the proper reports. That's what they provide for us all the time. Just want to clarify those two issues. Oh, Councillor Christopherson. I was thinking we were finished here.
I think we're dealing with an amendment to the motion, are we not? And the amendment is simply to add an RFP. So I think they're two completely separate issues. I have no problem with going to RFPs and anything like that, but I don't think it belongs with this particular motion. We're being asked in the motion whether we should do a one-year term. I think we've clearly outlined to staff some of our concerns and questions about it, and that they will bring us back a report on it. So I don't particularly like tying the process of RFPs to what is basically a very simple motion of renewing for 1 year. And so I'm not comfortable with tying the two things together, and I will vote against the amendment.
Okay. Councillor White.
I think it needs to be clarified that nobody's picking on the Baillie House, and I think everybody agrees that the Baillie House has done an excellent job over the years. The bottom line is they are not a visitor tourism center. They don't have washrooms. They provide a lot of things, but I guess for the argument's sake, is that they are not a tourism center. And prior to having that title, they were successful at doing what they were doing. And I just think that the way it is right now, they won't be left in the wind, and there will be proper funding in order for them to continue on. And I mean, that's another area that we have to look at down the road. We can't just leave them. I mean, it would be silly to just leave it's an attraction. It's an attraction in the community, and it's an attraction we need. But we also need a proper visitor's booth where someone can go to the washroom and they can stretch their legs, maybe grab a coffee or whatever they're doing. And they can do that at the Baillie House to a point, but there's no parking. And so nobody's taking away from the Baillie House, but I think it's something that we do need to look at coming up and moving forward. And I support the motion, and I support the motion renewing for a year with looking at all the other options to make a proper decision down the road. Thanks.
Councillor Bangu.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I like Councillor Luck's amendment. We've waited for 2 years for some sort of action on a visitors information center. and it hasn't occurred. And I understand the obstacles that have been in play, but to ensure that it does occur, I think it is a good idea to have it within the amendment. And I think Councillor White touches on excellent points, which is the Baillie House is the Baillie House. And the Nicola Valley Heritage Society has done a wonderful job over the years. But the Baillie House is not a visitors information center, in my opinion. And just my own experiences have shown me that. And if the Baillie House was to just focus on being the Baillie House, perhaps they can generate the revenue that they require to continue running. But again, as Councillor White mentions, no one will bail on the Baillie House, but perhaps we need to align them with the appropriate funding and not funding that's required for something else. Thank you.
Councillor Luck, do you have anything new? I don't want repeat.
Oh, yes, I do, out of fact. You know, debates are awesome around the table. We can sit there and debate things like this and everything, and we get to go back in the recesses of our mind and think about the things we're elected to do and things like that, and process and that. And a nice part of debates at the end of them, you know, there should be compromise sometimes. And I think that's an important part of debate. So I will compromise a little bit on this one, and I realize that maybe the RFP piece scares people a bit. But so I would like to remove that piece from that amendment, if that's possible. After the staff reports and everything, I'll take that RFP piece out.
Can we hold that for a moment?
Yep. We just got to process how to do that.
Mr. Lois, can we
So
amend?
how do I do that?
Excuse me. Mr. Lois, can you amend an amendment?
This gets into the fun parts of the procedure bylaw, which we are frantically ignoring because they're all over the place. There is a provision that you cannot amend an amendment, but this hasn't yet been passed, so it isn't yet an amendment to the motion. It's simply a proposal to amend the motion. So if you'd already voted on this, then I would be feeling a lot less comfortable. But since you have moved an amendment, you are proposing to move a very similar but slightly different amendment. If there is somebody who's willing to second that revised amendment, then I would have no problem with that.
So do I have to put the whole amendment, or can I just say the amendment as on the board, excluding and including a full RFP process? Can I just remove that?
That bit in italics, and then assuming that your seconder or another seconder is comfortable.
Because I moved it, right?
That.
So I think I can do that, and then as long as the seconder agrees with me?
Councillor White seconded the original motion. Then I have no problem with this. So this would end after operating structures.
So after hearing that talk around the table, I think that's probably a good way to do it, because I still want to make sure that piece about looking at this other thing gets codified in a motion, so we know that staff knows to do that, rather than say, well, we kind of hope staff will look at that. I think this is really important to have it in a motion, just like every motion. That's why we make these motions, to have things move forward and get completed. So that's why I've amended and compromised a little bit on it, so I hope you see the spirit of where I'm going with that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Tony, you've still got your.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Greg, you still have yours on?
Sorry.
Okay, I'll call the question.
What are we voting on?
I'm getting there. That council directs the mayor and director of corporate services to execute a one-year tourism and visitor information services agreement with the Nicola Valley Heritage Society for $52,133, and that the staff research a new Merritt Business Center, including but not limited to locations, budgets, grants, and operating structures. Did I get that correct? Councillor Fair. We've got somebody else in the mix. Okay. Oh, sorry, we've got Mr. Lois.
I apologize, Your Worship. Mr. George just wanted me to clarify as well. This is for that financial figure was for 2021. So just to clarify, in that is just the single year. And so that is now the proposal to amend the recommendation at that point, to read that.
To add the additional.
So if you pass it, you would still need to vote again on the substantive motion.
Yes. Right. So this is just the amendment. And Councillor Fair.
Thank you. I just want to make the point that I have confidence in staff's ability to do what they've said they're going to do, which is to come back with us with a report. So, which means I cannot support this amendment because I have faith in staff, and that's all.
Councillor Christopherson.
That's, Councillor Fair has expressed it, because although I now agree with what Councillor Luck is saying as far as looking, staff has already said that that's what they're going to be doing, and so I don't think we need to put it into a motion once they've said that they're going to be doing that. I think it's redundant. It's not a bad amendment, it's redundant. So.
Thank you. Councillor Bangu.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I understand exactly what Councillor Fair and Councillor Christopherson are suggesting. So what does it matter if it's on there or not? That's, you know what I mean? I do get what you're saying, so it shouldn't matter either way. If it's on there or it isn't on there, they're going to do it anyways. So that's all I'm saying.
Councillor White.
Okay, I'm a little confused on this because what I'm reading, it says, staff are seeking council direction on the overall desire for a new Merritt Visitor Center. So they're asking us to give them the direction, so does that not have to go in a motion? I know, but everybody's arguing about it.
Okay. Councillor Fair.
So to elaborate on why I want to not support the amendment is that staff has presented the option within this report. And I don't want to tamper with what their intention is because I don't see any reason to.
But I don't see an option.
Can we round this up? We're going back and forth again and again and again. Councillor Luck, do you have something to?
Well, these will be my last comments, but.
You just turned it off.
Oh, sorry, I just turned it off, sorry. My last comments. This is what we do as a council. We make amendments, we move motions to give staff direction. I don't understand why we're struggling with them. Right or wrong, it's some of the things I've heard tonight, well, we hope staff will do it and everything like that, and I put my faith in, I do, I put my faith in staff and they do it. But they've asked me from solid direction here, and we've made a motion. If I hear what I'm hearing around the table tonight, why we make another amendment this next 2 years as council? We don't need to make amendments because staff knows exactly what we want to do. Like, I just don't understand some of the talk around the table here. I could be wrong, I'll admit if I'm wrong, but that's what we do as a council. We set direction, we make motions, and we put it in place for staff to take it and work with it. They're looking for direction. This, to me, is solid direction for the staff. So I don't care if you vote for it or against it, but I think there's a travesty here tonight about how we deal with motions and amendments to motions. It's unbelievable. So that's just my comment.
Can I make a statement that this isn't a motion about supporting staff or not supporting staff. This is about us being able to move a motion one way or the other. We're getting way off track. Councillor White, do you still have your?
Well, I mean, I'm reading what it's saying here, that they're asking us to give them direction to do that. And to me, that's what it sounded like in that motion, that's what we were doing. And then it's saying staff's recommending option 1. Well, I don't have, what I'm reading here is recommendation. They want us to execute a 1-year tourism information and the agreement for the 1 year for the $52,000. Then some background, and then asking us to give them direction on getting the other information. So that's, to me, I mean, that's kind of two separate things, and the motion's making it into one.
I think staff will be bringing a report back to council. I think that's what they're saying. And I'm hearing that we don't need to tell staff to bring back a report that they're already saying they're going to bring back.
It says it's seeking council direction. That's what it says, right here. Staff are seeking council direction.
I'm reading the same thing. I'm just interpreting it a little differently than what you are. May I move to staff for a final statement in terms of what your intentions are in bringing a report to council?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to council. I think staff, we're hearing you loud and clear. We have lots of notes here of what the staff report should include, and that will be coming forward in 2021 around all of these items that were brought up tonight. So whichever way council chooses, we're hearing you loud and clear that council is looking for additional information on what we can have for a visitor center, other examples, and there's lots of questions down here that we'll be doing some research into. So whatever the case, there will be a staff report bringing forward on these items. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Etchart, final word? Oh. Final.
All the comments going around the table, we really made to make a decision or get off the pot here. It's getting a little ridiculous. I know that this has been the case for 2 years, and a lot of things have happened in between, like our zoning and other amendments and the flood work that's happened and COVID. So I agree with Councillor-elect that this has gone on for a long time and 2 years, but I also realize that the staff has worked really hard at doing the projects that they've done. And I'm grateful for that, and I'm sure a lot of us are. And I think, and I have confidence that things are going to move ahead, and we're all realizing that this has to happen. And I agree with Councillor White in saying that the Baillie House is a small facility, and it probably isn't going to be the long-term solution, and that Baillie House is a landmark, and it is, and we can treat it as such. And I'm in support of renewing the contract and waiting for that report that's going to come and have the answers that we need. And I think that we just need to be quiet and make a decision. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. So we're back to the main motion. That council direct the mayor and director of corporate services to execute a one-year tourism and visitor information service agreement with the Nicola Valley Heritage Society for 52,133.20 in 2021. Need a mover, or we've already got that? I'm going to call that question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, on to 8.4, which was our late item. Open meetings order M192-2020. I need a mover that council resolve that the public cannot be safely accommodated at Merritt City Hall meetings within the public health orders issued by Dr. Bonnie Henry, and that openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability will be met by videoing and webcasting all meetings on www.merritt.ca, briefing media before meetings, and publishing agendas and minutes on www.ca. And that therefore the public are to be excluded from all open meetings from November 25th, 2020 to January 13th, 2021. Second. And discussion. Do we have any questions for staff first? Mr. Lois, this is your report. Can you give us your report, please?
Yes, Your Worship.
Oh, I'll help you along there.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you all know, matters are moving fairly quickly at the moment, and so on Thursday of last week, Dr. Henry issued a new instruction that basically all public gatherings were to be halted forthwith. We therefore held our public meetings online on Friday, although on Friday some additional clarification came down that this didn't necessarily affect formal meetings such as council meetings, public hearings. Therefore, we're here sitting in person tonight. Nevertheless, earlier this year, Ministerial Order M192 was issued, which granted councils, regardless of the contents of their procedure bylaws, the authority to hold meetings entirely online if they wanted to, or to exclude members of the public if they felt they couldn't be safely accommodated, or to continue operating as they were doing so anyway. As a result of the new uptick in cases, there's been another record high in British Columbia today. Staff are proposing that the authority under Order 192 be enacted by Merritt City Council. Following the experience we had earlier this year of moving all of your meetings online, which I think all of you felt were less productive than the in-person meetings, we didn't want to recommend moving everything back onto Teams meetings. However, because of the difficulty in managing just everyone coming through the chamber, obviously today is not a particularly busy meeting, but in recent meetings we have had people literally lining out the doors. We've been vastly overloading the capacity of the lobby in some cases. We've had to ask staff to leave the meetings in order to make room for the public. It's extremely difficult to predict when that's going to be the case, and therefore it's very hard for staff to organize how the meetings are going to be run. We've had people calling into City Hall even today asking whether or not they would be allowed to come. And although we can tell them, you're technically allowed to turn up, but we strongly encourage you to watch online, it feels very wishy-washy. We still have no idea who's going to actually follow through with that or who's going to want to show up. So if you did adopt this, then it would allow for a very clean line of you will be meeting in person. However, the public gallery would not have anyone in it for the time being. Obviously, all open meetings would continue to be broadcast online. So for the committee meetings as well, I think we would turn the cameras on for that and probably put them on the city's YouTube channel after the event. So we would absolutely want to keep all openness and transparency that we could. But that would make it a lot easier to actually just run City Hall and know who is coming through it. The proposal before you is to enact that functionally effective immediately until the day after your first meeting in January, as that would allow you to then consider whether or not this was still as serious an issue then, if people obeyed the new advice to socialize as little as possible, if that led to reductions, or if things were still getting worse, then you could consider either extending the order or moving things back into a fully virtual environment. So that's the proposal before you.
And can I ask, what are we planning for presentations or public input?
So,
what would we be planning?
Absolutely. So delegations would still be technically permitted. The way we would have to run them would be with virtual presence. So either people could, say, record videos and then we could play those on these screens, or people could submit written reports. We always allow for, say, information items to be submitted in written form. We would absolutely allow delegations to be presented in written form in that basis. There are a number of municipalities around British Columbia who adopted this quite some time ago, and ones who have done so recently, Kamloops and Kelowna, are both running without public hearings, basically at the moment. They're, I think, only taking written submissions, and wherever possible, they're just not having the hearings at all. There are some situations where you're actually allowed to not hold a hearing. We have always, I think, at least in recent years, held hearings in Merritt, but so we haven't gone as far as they have. But yeah, we would absolutely take we would take phone messages, we would take written formats, we would take videos, whatever was necessary.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Do we have the mover and seconder? I remember speaking to it, but I don't remember anybody moving or. Okay. Yeah, I've got that in front of me, thank you. So was there a seconder, is my question. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to call debate. Okay, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None carried. Notices of motion? Okay, and reports from council. Councillor White. Whoops. I'm gonna.
You got
Oh, sorry. White, Fair, and then Christopherson. I think, you were all on.
Tourism Nicola Valley, along with Experience Nicola Valley, has sponsored a popular fishing guide and TV show. Wes David of Fishing the Wild West TV show will be coming to the Nicola Valley in 2021 to film an ice fishing and spring fishing episode featuring our local fishing industry. The partnership aims to promote our year-round fishing season. The Wild West TV show is broadcast out to 32 million viewers via CTV, Global, and Wild West TV. We look forward to welcoming Wes David to our community and enjoying a lake day for as long as he stays. And that'll be happening in the winter of January, February, March for the ice fishing, and then in the spring for the other fishing, lake fishing.
That's great.
Cool. I don't know who I said. Councillor Fair? I'll get back to you.
Thank you. So I recently had a fire smart assessment done of my home, and I just wanted to report that it's not as painful as it might sound. It was actually easier than going to the dentist, so I would encourage anybody and everybody else to do the same.
Councillor Christopherson.
Thank you. Last week I had mentioned that Country Christmas was not going ahead, and Christmas decorating was we had mentioned that. So in the meantime, with the mayor's blessing, I've been in touch with quite a few people in Merritt and the Country Christmas Committee, and everyone was very much in favor of encouraging as many people as possible to light up and decorate this year. And we felt strongly that participation is the key. Whether it means just being able to put up a string of lights around your doorway, and for some folks, that's about all they can manage. Or going full bore with a fantastic display for the Clark Griswolds of this world. It's what's in your heart that matters. The goal is to bring a little extra cheer into the season this year, to lift our spirits and to offer some glimmers of normality to help offset the impact of COVID. We felt, though, it was a little late to properly organize an actual contest with all the details that go into that. But we are hoping that with the help of social media and radio and newspapers, Michael, that the hot spots will soon be noted for people to go out and see. The enthusiasm is definitely there, and while the lighting displays are definitely a great idea, we would also request that you do remember the less fortunate. The tree light up in Spirit Square was traditionally a collection point for mittens, gloves, scarves, toques, and socks. And that's not happening, so I'm hoping that there are still collection spots operating for the needy. And again, perhaps social media can help to identify those spots. So thank you.
And any other council report? Seeing none, we'll move on to information items. We have a report from Finance. Mr. Strang.
I'll make this quick. It's a few pages here, but I won't read through them all. The reason that we're bringing this forward as an information item is Oftentimes when we have service level changes, especially service level changes that cost or save money, it's an important thing to bring it up with council. And for maybe some people watching at home, we can get some free publicity out of some of the online initiatives that we've had and get the word out there a little more. Definitely in the last few months, people's preference has changed in how they're interacting with the finance department at City Hall, I guess with City Hall period. Forcibly changed, I guess, because our operating hours are lower and, we've just had a lot of challenges interacting with people in ways that they're expecting. They're expecting to bring checks down, and as you'll see a little bit later, it's been difficult for people to interact in that way. So we've had to bring forward some new initiatives. Transit passes, we've moved over to 7-Eleven. So they are now available during 7-Eleven's full 24-hour day. That system's up and running and working very well. They will likely at some point be available at the visitor center as well, but with COVID closures and everything else, we haven't implemented that. So at the current time, there are 7-Eleven and still available on a accounts receivable basis to some of the other community organizations that buy passes in bulk for their own customers. So everyone's been very happy with that. We've also moved forward with moving utility billing and property taxes online with email sign-ups. So lots of people have online accounts, and those people have to actually go and sign up for email billing. So there'll be an email blast and a social media blast closer to the next utility billing cycle to get those people signed up. We had some information stuff out there so that we can just more effectively communicate with people. We aren't sending out massive amounts of letters and waiting for people to come in and everything else. And as soon as we did that, we got a lot of feedback. Hey, that's great, but I still have to pay the bill, of course. And, how do I do that? Can I write you a check and put it in the mailbox? Yes, you can, but, let me help you make your life easier. And so we evaluated a bunch of different options. At the current time, the city has a credit card option through a company called PayTM, which is a credit card option, but it tacks on an extra fee of 2.25% to the user. Which, isn't a huge amount of money, but it's an additional amount of money. And as an accountant, you think about that when you're paying a utility bill, right? So we haven't had a huge uptake on things like utilities. There has been some users for business licenses and whatnot that have used PayTM. But largely, utilities haven't been impacted. People are still bringing in checks, which we're always going to have and we're always happy to take, but we'd like to provide some other options. EFTs have had really good pickup in the last few years, but they're starting to level out. I think we're just hitting kind of market saturation with that because it is kind of I'm not going to say a complex process, but it's a multi-step process that you have to interact with your bank and set it up and type in numbers and everything else. So what we did is we have an existing relationship with Moneris. They provide our point-of-sale terminals at the Leisure Center and the Civic Center, and then they have an online portal that they offered us after a significant amount of back and forth, an extremely attractive rate that just, on a utility bill, we're talking $1 a transaction for somebody to be able to click Pay Now and have the account number automatically associated with the payment and everything to process through. So that's not something the city has offered before. That's probably the most requested thing that I hear from people, and I think it hasn't been done before just because it is generally expensive to do. But at this point, we've been offered a long-term, very attractive rate for Moneris to sign us up with a Visa MasterCard. The cost of it's fairly negligible in the big picture. Depending upon the uptake, we're talking between $1,000 and $3,000 for a 20% to a 60% uptake for people. So that is kind of what we've been working on. We're kind of working through a few other interactions with the public, because the finance department is a lot of the interactions with the bulk of the public. Obviously development services has a ton of interactions with people building things, but finance is where people are calling in and trying to have questions and pay bills and et cetera, et cetera. So pet licensing, business licensing, these are all things that we're going to be bringing forward in the coming months to make interactions with the public a little bit easier and fulfill some of their requests. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Strang?
You still have to pay, right? Sadly, yes.
Councillor Fair.
No questions, just wanted to express appreciation for working on that. And I know as an accountant, as you said, you're trying to address the fees that come with these various online payments, and that's appreciated too. I'm sure all users would appreciate it, so thank you.
Thanks. I've been very lucky that Wayne's been doing some of the really fun stuff like reserve funding, and he's actually left me to do, online and pictures and graphs and everything else.
I have a question. In terms of things like dog tags that are probably not part of this yet, are we looking at something like that?
Ask me in a month. Actually, I'll probably be back here in a month with another information.
Okay,
It's
so
on my desk right
more
now.
to come.
Yes, there is
Good.
more to come. Dog tags are next because our renewal cycle is in January. So I wanted to get this done before the utility billing went out, and now I'm on that.
Okay,
Thank you, Your Worship.
so there's method to your madness. And any other questions for Mr. Strang? Thank you. And there is no motion to be made. Thank you. On to 11.2, staff engagement update. And this is somebody going to speak to this one, Mr. Lois?
Your Worship, Ms. Coulson isn't here tonight, but yeah, I can speak very briefly to it. Earlier this year, Councillor Etchart moved a motion about a staff satisfaction survey. And this is a partial response to that. It's obviously not a full piece yet. The particular issue around the timing of that was that the council motion came immediately after a staff engagement survey had been undertaken about how staff were responding to COVID issues in the workplace. And so our HR department felt that if there was another survey done immediately afterwards, the only thing it would detect would be COVID-related things. And she felt that that wasn't really what you were looking to get at. So this is an ongoing project, and the motion has definitely not been forgotten. This is the first part of a response to it, of looking at staff engagement and how it works at City Hall.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Lois? Thank you. And now 11.3, minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting are just there for your review. We're not I was going to say amending, but that's not the word I want. We're not approving them at this meeting. And now we move into closed session. I need a mover that the meeting be closed to the public under sections 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, an employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality, and G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality. Okay, and we are now moving in camera.